Constitution. Is the Patriot Act ever patriotic or about protecting freedom? Has security trumped freedom, whatever the outcome of the Patriot Act debate in Congress? What do any of these words even mean in 2015? The NSA collects data. We collect your ideas of patriotism at 877-8-MY-TAKE. Next time on The Takeaway, weekday mornings at 9 on AM 820 and at 3 on 93.9 FM WNYC.
WNYC is supported by Holland America Line, offering a variety of European cruises this summer and fall, featuring Mediterranean and Northern Europe itineraries. More information available through a travel professional or at hollandamerica.com. Support for The Green Space, WNYC's street-level, state-of-the-art events venue and broadcast studio at 160 Barrack Street, is provided by the Jerome L. Green Foundation. From NPR News in Washington, I'm Nancy Lyons. 2 days after key portions of the law expired, a revamped surveillance bill has been approved by the Senate. It will end the ability of spy agencies to collect Americans' phone records in bulk and installs a more targeted approach. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell argued against the changes and said there's nothing wrong with the old system of collection.
No content, no names, no listening to phone calls of law-abiding citizens. None of that is going on. We're talking about call data records.
But in the end, the Senate voted 67-32 to approve the more restrictive surveillance program, something Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid applauded.
It makes it so that people feel more secure about the intelligence operation we have going on in this country.
The House has already passed the bill, and President Obama says he will sign it quickly. A friend of Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev is receiving a 6-year prison sentence for taking and hiding evidence in the case. As NPR's Tovia Smith reports, the 21-year-old Kazakh student admitted obstructing justice in a plea deal.
Diaz Kaderbayev says he wishes he could go back and change what he calls the stupid decisions he made. As prosecutors put it, he was covering up for his friend Tsarnaev right when he should have been helping authorities find him sooner. Kaderbayev took Tsarnaev's laptop and backpack filled with fireworks from his dorm room and dumped the backpack in the trash. The judge gave him slightly less than what prosecutors sought, but more than what Kaderbayev wanted. His father says prison is especially difficult because he's being kept in solitary confinement. That's for his own protection. Tovia Smith, NPR News, at the federal court in Boston.
On Wall Street today, stocks faded to finish the day with modest losses. Utilities led the declines. The Dow closed down 28 points. The Nasdaq gave up 6. The S&P fell 2. This is NPR.
And this is WNYC. I'm Richard Hake. The for-profit company that provides healthcare services at Rikers Island will not have its contract renewed. Tennessee-based Corizon has been under intense scrutiny after a string of inmate deaths, raising questions about the company's response at the jail. Rosa Goldenson first reported the story for the news website DNA Info. She says there have been 13 deaths blamed on inadequate medical and mental health care.
From cancer to liver failure to seizures to diabetes, it's a lot of misdiagnosis, people not being seen properly, not being seen for their appointments.
According to DNA Info, the city's Public Health and Hospitals Corporation will take over. Mayor de Blasio acknowledges a spike in shootings is alarming, but wants to reassure people the police department is handling the problem. The mayor held a question and answer session today, a day after the release of figures showing shootings in the city are up 9% from the same period last year, from 403 to 439. He notes most of the shootings were limited to about a dozen precincts and were largely gang-on-gang violence. Starting next week, 330 officers will be pulled from their usual duties for special patrols to handle the spike. Polls are open for the New Jersey primary. Voters are picking Democratic and Republican candidates for November's election. With assembly seats at the top of ballots, experts are expecting a low voter turnout. The last time New Jersey assembly seats topped primary ballots was in 1999, when only 6% of eligible voters went to the polls. Newark is launching a municipal ID program for residents age 14 and older. New Jersey Public Radio's Sarah Gonzalez has more.
The city says the new ID cards will serve as proof of identity and residency, regardless of immigration status, gender identity, or incarceration history. Not having an address also won't be a problem. Mayor Raz Baraka says he hopes the new IDs help transgender residents and the homeless feel comfortable working in Newark and receiving city services and discounts for residents. Adults will pay $15 for the new ID. Children and seniors, $7. The pilot program launches July 1st and opens citywide in August. For WNYC, I'm Sarah Gonzalez.
A dozen new Peregrine Falcon chicks are living atop 3 bridges. The chicks were born last month on the Verrazano Narrows, the Marine Parkway Hodges Memorial Bridge, and the Throgs Neck Bridge. The MTA provides nesting boxes on the bridge, and a city biologist climbs up each year to check the health of the chicks and bands them. This is WNYC at 5:35.
Support for NPR comes from member stations and from Squarespace, providing tools for creative individuals and business owners to make a website. Squarespace includes hosting, e-commerce, and 24/7 customer care. Learn more at squarespace.com/NPR. And the Walton Family Foundation, working to prepare all students for a lifetime of opportunity by ensuring access to high-quality K-12 choices. More information is available at waltonk12.org.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Audie Cornish.
And I'm Alyssa Block. A tense standoff in Congress over the government's surveillance powers came to a speedy end this afternoon. The Senate approved legislation already passed by the House to reinstate several spying provisions. But the new measure ends the government's ability to collect Americans' phone records in bulk. It's now headed to the White House for President Obama's signature. NPR's David Wellner reports.
The Senate today ran out the clock on the stalling tactics that Kentucky Republican and presidential contender Rand Paul had used to block a bill that would extend lapsed powers. But even though Majority Leader Mitch McConnell joined most other senators in voting to limit further debate, he made clear he was not happy with the bill passed by the House that ends the massive collection of Americans' calling records.
Before scrapping an effective system that has helped protect us from attack in favor of an untried one, we should at least work towards securing some modest degree of assurance that the new system can, in fact, actually work.
McConnell's bid to place new restrictions on the so-called USA Freedom Act prompted that bill's supporters to rally in its defense. Ron Wyden is an Oregon Democrat.
We are now here because the majority leader wasn't able to defeat surveillance reform, so instead he has chosen to introduce amendments designed to water it down.
And Minnesota Democrat Al Franken rejected McConnell's bid to double the length of the 6-month phase-out of the bulk collection program to a full year.
The Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence have told us that the USA Freedom Act is fine as it is. There simply isn't a problem in need of a solution here.
All 4 of McConnell's proposed amendments were defeated. North Carolina Republican Richard Burr, who chairs the Intelligence Committee, was on the losing side. He warned that the country is worse off because former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden exposed the bulk phone data collection program 2 years ago.
It was not a public program until Eric Snowden, a traitor to the United States, published a lot of information about what the intelligence community does. This was one small piece.
As the Senate voted 67-32 to give final passage to the USA Freedom Act, Snowden spoke to an Amnesty International gathering in London via a video link from his exile in Moscow. He touted his leaking of the bulk collection program as key to the changes in the Patriot Act now enacted by Congress.
This was the first classified record or evidence we ever saw about mass surveillance. And I think it is meaningful, it's important, and actually historic that this has been repudiated not just by the courts, but by Congress as well. And the president himself is saying that this mass surveillance program has to end.
And it wasn't just Snowden who saw this saga in Washington as the fruit of his revelations. Majority Leader McConnell bitterly pointed out on the Senate floor what the Associated Press was calling today's vote
A resounding victory for Edward Snowden. It is also a resounding victory for those who currently plotted against our homeland.
And even though President Obama strongly supports ending the NSA's bulk collection program, his spokesman Josh Earnest told reporters that this is not a time to reassess the government's aim of prosecuting Snowden.
The fact is that Mr. Snowden committed very serious crimes, and the U.S. government and the Department of Justice believe that he should face them.
President Obama, meanwhile, tweeted that he's glad the Senate finally passed the USA Freedom Act. He said he'll sign it as soon as he gets it. David Wellner, NPR News, Washington.
President Obama also stopped today to recognize two men. One was African American, one Jewish. Both risked their lives to save their comrades during World War I, but were never properly recognized. Today, those soldiers, Henry Johnson and William Shemin, were posthumously awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Here's NPR's Tom Bowman.
Henry Johnson signed up to be a soldier with a New York unit from Harlem, but as an African American in 1918, said President Obama, the Army had little interest in his skills.
At the time, our military was segregated. Most black soldiers served in labor battalions, not combat units. But General Pershing sent the 369th to fight with the French Army, which accepted them as their own.
So Johnson and the other black soldiers wore French helmets, carried French weapons, served on the front lines with French troops. And in the pre-dawn hours of May 15, 1918, Johnson was on sentry duty at an outpost in the outskirts of France's Argonne Forest, some 50 yards from Allied trenches. Suddenly, at least a dozen Germans rushed them, firing on Johnson and his fellow sentry Needham Roberts. Roberts passed out from his wounds. The Germans tried to capture him. Johnson was wounded himself, but fought back, alone.
Henry took down one enemy soldier, then the other. The soldier he knocked down with his rifle recovered, and Henry was wounded again. But armed with just his knife, Henry took him down too.
Henry Johnson received the highest French medal for bravery, the Croix de Guerre avec Palme. From the Americans, he received nothing, not even disability payments, though he was wounded 21 times and wasn't able to return to his job as a railroad porter. With no job, estranged from his wife and children, Johnson sunk into alcoholism and died at age 32.
America can't change what happened to Henry Johnson. We can't change what happened to too many soldiers like him who went uncelebrated because our nation judged them by the color of their skin and not the content of their character. But we can do our best to make it right.
The president also awarded a Medal of Honor to Sergeant William Shemin, the son of Jewish immigrants from Russia who lied about his age to enlist. And the president said Shemin also faced prejudice because of his religion.
Because Sergeant Shemin served at a time when the contributions and heroism of Jewish Americans in uniform were too often overlooked.
But what Shemin did not overlook were the wounded Americans outside his trench in the Western Front in August of 1918.
William Shemin couldn't stand to watch. He ran out into the hell of no man's land and dragged a wounded comrade to safety. And then he did it again and again. 3 times he raced through heavy machine gun fire. 3 times he carried his fellow soldiers to safety.
Shemin did receive the Distinguished Service Cross at the time for his bravery, an award just below the Medal of Honor, but his daughter Elsie said during a recent press conference that he should have received the top honor.
Bill, my father always told me his war experience was never about medals. I knew in my heart he was deserving of the highest military award for valor, the Medal of Honor.
Elsie and her sister Ina were in the audience at the White House today when the president looked down at them.
Well, Elsie, as much as America meant to your father, he means even more to America.
The two sisters then stood next to the president as their father's medal citation was read aloud.
Sergeant William Shemin distinguished himself by extraordinary acts of heroism at the risk
Tom
of his
Bowman,
life.
NPR News, Washington.